But this is juice time, not coffee time. Addressing my grandmother again, she said, "Orange or grape or cranberry, dear?" "Tell her I want no juices, Mike," my grandmother commanded regally, her eyes still watching invisible birds. The woman smiled, patience like a label on her face. "That's all right, dear. I'll just leave some cranberry for you. Drink it at your leisure. It's good for the bones." She wheeled herself out of the room. My grandmother was still absorbed in the view. Somewhere a toilet flushed, a wheelchair passed the doorway, probably that same old driver, fleeing a hit-run accident. A television set exploded with sounds somewhere, soap opera voices filling the air. You can always tell soap opera voices. I turned back to find my grandmother staring at me, her hands cupped in her face, her index fingers curled around her cheeks like parentheses marks. But Mike, looking back, "I think you were right," she said, continuing our conversation as if there had been no interruption. "You always said it's the things of the spirit that count, Meg, the spirit. And so you bought the baby grand piano, a baby grand in the middle of the Depression. A knock came on the door, and it was the delivery man. It took 5 of them to get it into the house." She leaned back, closing her eyes. "How I love that piano, Mike. I was never that fine a player, but you loved to sit there in the parlor on Sunday evenings, Ellie on your lap, listening to me play and sing." She hummed a bit, a fragment of melody I didn't recognize. Then she drifted into silence. Maybe she'd fallen asleep. "My mother's name is Ellen, but everybody always calls her Ellie." "Take my hand, Mike," my grandmother said suddenly. Then I remembered my grandfather's name was Michael. I had been named for him. "Ah, Mike," she said, pressing my hands with all her feeble strength. "I thought I lost you forever, and here you are, back again. And here you are, back with me again." Her expression scared me. I don't think scared of as if I were in danger, but scared because of what could happen to her when she realized the mistake she had made. My mother always said I had favored her side of the family. Thinking back to the pictures in the old family albums, I recalled my grandfather as tall as thin like me, but the resemblance ended there. He was 35 when he died, almost 40 years ago, and he wore a mustache. I wrote my hand to my face. I also wore a mustache now, of course. "I sit here these days, Mike," she said, her voice in a lullaby, her hand still holding mine. "And I drift and dream. These days are fuzzy sometimes, merging together. Sometimes it's not like I'm not here, but somewhere else altogether. And I always think of you. Those years we had. Not enough years, Mike, not enough." Her voice was so sad, so mournful, that I made sounds of sympathy. Not words exactly, but the kind of soothings that made mothers murmur to their children when they had awakened from bad dreams. "And I think of that terrible night, Mike, that terrible night. Have you ever really forgiven me for that night?" "Listen," I began. I wanted to say, "Nana, this is Mike, your grandson, not Mike, your husband." "Shh," she whispered, placing a finger as long and cold as a candle against my lips. "Don't say anything. I've waited so long for this moment, to be here with you. I wondered what I would say if suddenly you walked in that door like other people have done. I thought and thought about it, and I finally made up my mind. I'd ask you to forgive me. I was too proud to ask before." Her fingers tried to mask her face. "But I'm not proud anymore, Mike." That grave voice quivered and then grew strong again. "I hate you to see me this way. You always said I was beautiful. I didn't believe it. The charity ball, when we led the grand march, you said I was the most beautiful girl there." "Nana," I said. I couldn't keep the pretense any longer, adding one more burden to my load of guilt, leading her on this way, playing a pathetic game of make-believe with an old woman clinging to her memories. She didn't seem to hear me. "But that other night, Mike, the terrible one, the terrible accusations I made, even Ellie woke up and began to cry. I went to her and rocked her in my arms, and you came into the room and said I was wrong. You were whispering an awful whisper, not wanting to upset little Ellie, but wanting to make me see the truth, and I didn't answer you, Mike. I was too proud. I've even forgotten the name of the girl. I sit here wondering now, was it Laura or Evelyn? I can't remember. Later I learned that you were telling the truth all the time, Mike, that I had been wrong." Her eyes were brighter than ever as she looked at me now, but tear-bright, the tears gathering. "I was never the same after the night, Mike, was it? The glitter was gone, from you, from us. Then the accident. I never had a chance to ask you to forgive me." My grandmother. My poor, poor grandmother. Old people aren't supposed to have those kinds of memories. You see, they're pictures in the family albums, and that's what they are, pictures. They're not supposed to come to life. You drive out and your father's lean man's doing 75 on the pike, and all you're doing is visiting an old lady in a nursing home, a duty call. And then you find out that she's a person. She's somebody. She's my grandmother, all right, but she's also herself. Like my own mother and father, they exist outside of their relationship to me. I was scared again. I wanted to get out of there. Mike, Mike, my grandmother said, say it, Mike. I felt as if my cheeks would crack if I uttered a word. Say you forgive me, Mike. I've waited all these years. I was surprised at how strong her fingers were. Say, I forgive you, Meg. I said it. My voice sounded funny, as if I was talking in a huge tunnel. I forgive you, Meg. Her eyes studied me. Her hands pressed mine. For the first time in my life, I saw love at work. Not movie love, not Cindy's sparkling eyes when I tell her that we are going to the beach on a Sunday afternoon. But love like something alive and tender, asking nothing in return. She raised her face and knew what she wanted me to do. I bent and brushed my lips against her cheek. Her flesh was like a leaf in autumn, crisp and dry. She closed her eyes and I stood up. The sun wasn't glinting on the cars any longer. Somebody had turned on another television set, and the voices were the show-off voices on the panel shows. At the same time, you could still hear the soap opera dialogue on the other television set. I waited a while. She seemed to be sleeping, her breath serene and regular. I buttoned my raincoat. Suddenly, she opened her eyes again and looked at me. Her eyes were still bright, but they merely stared at me, without recognition or curiosity. Empty eyes. I smiled at her, but she didn't smile back. She made kind of a moaning sound and turned away on the bed, pulling the blankets around her. I counted to 25 and then to 50 and did it all over again. I cleared my throat and coughed tentatively. She didn't move. She didn't respond. I wanted to say, Nana, it's me, but I didn't. I thought of saying, Meg, it's me, but I couldn't. Finally, I left, just like that. I didn't say goodbye or anything. I stalked through the corridors, looking neither to the right nor the left, not caring what the wild old man with the wheelchair ran me down or not. On the Southwest Turnpike, I did 75, no 80, most of the way. I turned the radio up to as loud as I could go, rock music, anything to fill the air. When I got home, my mother was vacuuming the living room rug. She shut off the cleaner, and the silence was deafening. Well, how was your grandmother? She asked. I told her she was fine. I told her a lot of things, how great Nana looked and how she seemed happy and had called me Mike. I wanted to ask her, hey, Mom, you and Dad really love each other, don't you? I mean, there's nothing to forgive between you, is there? But I didn't. Instead, I went upstairs and took out the electric razor Annie had given me for Christmas and shaved off my mustache.